Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I know it has been quite a while. I got some new important responsibilities last year at work and I had to focus on them and I still have to. I'm not sure how I will be able to get back to a normal release schedule, but I still want to make videos, but I don't want to get stressed about it. I want this to be a hobby, and for me the most important is production quality. And I don't want to feel the pressure of uploading, especially if I don't have the time to work on my videos properly. But anyway, today we are back to discuss a little bit about some of the exciting content that will be coming to 0 Hour with Operation Red Wedding. And we will focus on the new weapons. Although I cannot show you in-game footage yet, we are allowed to share impressions about some of the work in progress content. So in this video, I will be sharing some of my impressions about the Mark 12, the FAL, the SKS and the HBB2 that will be added to the game in the near future, since the update is supposed to go live on March the 7th, which is tomorrow, if everything goes well. Available to attackers in PvP, the Mark 12 is a semi-automatic rifle with no full automatic fire mode, which is an interesting thing that this update brings, since we didn't have weapons like this before. The Mark 12 comes with 20 rounds mags and delivers a really high damage output per projectile. However, its downsides are that it has rather high recoil and not the fastest rate of fire. Personally, and as a European person who doesn't have easy access to a lot of firearms, I have become a lot more interested in the MK12 since the release of the movie Lone Survivors, a movie I highly encourage you to watch and to do some background research to better understand the context of that movie. Gunplay wise, I really enjoy this Mark 12. It feels like something that can deal a serious amount of damage to the enemy with a single shot, and while you will most definitely one-shot someone if you aim for the head, you will still deal a lot of damage if you aim for the rest of the body, enough to send a strong message to the enemy team and force them to stay in cover while the rest of your unit pushes towards the objective. The MK12 is loud, it's bulky, it feels reliable, it has a high damage output, but it's most definitely not something that will work well on all maps. This is something for large open spaces and corridors, definitely for those who enjoy taking the role of providing overwatch, but not the most suitable weapon for close quarters. It is not the most versatile weapon for this kind of gunplay, and it's definitely something that needs to be used in specific tactics. I don't think the MK12 will please the most bloodthirsty and fast-paced players out there. It definitely stands out from the rest of the weapon inventory, and although its damage output might be quite appealing, I don't think it will be the most popular weapon among attackers. And obviously, the defenders also get somewhat of an equivalent, the SKS. Also a semi-automatic rifle, the SKS comes with a mag of 15 rounds and also delivers a high damage output per projectile. And while it has less ammo compared to the Mark 12, at least at the time of recording, it has a slightly higher rate of fire and recoil that is easier to manage in my opinion. I really like this SKS because I think it's finally providing the defenders with a more reliable long-range weapon that will enable them to cover large open spaces and corridors better than before, and it adds a new dynamic to the game where we will have long-range players being able to face each other on both sides, attacking sides and defending sides, more than before. I also feel that the reloads might be slightly faster than the MK12, but it could be that it was just an impression. It would be something that I need to test better and put in the video at a later stage. Just like the MK12, I also don't think the SKS will be very popular among players who like to roam around the map. I just think it's not the kind of gameplay they will enjoy, and more importantly, not the kind of gameplay they need in order to be efficient. But I can see the SKS to be perfect for the more patient or shy players who like to cover an angle and don't get distracted too easily during the match. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the new ARs, starting with the Honey Badger. Available to the attackers, the HB is somewhat of a beast and it feels great to play with. You get the power of a typical AR with the benefits of a small SMG, or some of the benefits. So you get damage and freedom. Coming with 30 rounds mags and a high rate of fire, it's the perfect friend for anyone who loves that really tight close quarter gunplay. I can see this weapon excelling on maps like Cafe 14 or even Embassy when you try to play between those tight door frames and so on. It has the typical reload time and animation though, which is something I want you to remember while I will be talking about the FAL in a moment. I will have to deep dive a little bit more in the numbers once the team has confirmed that they are done with the balancing in order to make proper comparisons, but I could imagine pro players out there taking either the M4 or the HB depending on the map, but also what or where they will be going. One thing not to forget, attachments. I could imagine M7 production establishing some differences in the balancing via the attachments, where the longer ARs would get more of them to tweak and improve the stats, while the HB might just get more limitations in the kind or how many attachments that you can get on the weapon. Ultimately, this also provides more powerful weapons that attackers can use, thus rebalancing the difficulty of the game in interesting ways. So even though future weapons might feel very similar to what we already had in the game, the simple fact that they get added to the game already impacts the general balancing of the PvP mod. For instance, attackers could now have more powerful weapons for more rounds than before, or they might as well just go all in with all M4s and all honey badgers right away. So I like that way of adding content, but obviously you cannot make new weapons always so different and more powerful than weapons we already had in order to make them more interesting. Otherwise, we would get overpowerful weapons at each update and everyone would always cry for hotfix to balance everything. So you also have to look at the big picture and how new weapons like this impact the overall design and balancing of the PvP mod. And so I think that's how we should look at the Honey Badger, and that's what I think about it. I don't think it's just about the individual gunplay of the weapon, it's also about how it changes the overall balancing and experience of the PvP mod. Last but not least, the FAL, or the FAL like some people say, is another really important weapon that gets added to 0 Hour with this update, and it is available to the defenders. Obviously an AR which comes with 30 rounds mags, a rather high rate of fire, decent damage, and quite some kick in the recoil, I have to say. I find it a little bit too unreliable on single fire, a little too hard to control in full auto, but it feels great in burst mode. So obviously there is no burst mode in the game, but you can control it manually if you use the full auto, and it feels like that's the sweet spot to make good use of this weapon. But the area where I think the FAL dominates over the Honey Badger and other ARs is the reload. I believe the FAL bolt release is pretty easy to access and requires a lot less movements to be operated, making the reloads much faster and much more direct than any other ARs we have in the game right now. It is, however, a much bigger weapon compared to the Honey Badger, and thus not necessarily ideal for tight places where I would prefer using something like the SOF or the Mach 10. It is great, however, for mid to long range engagement though. Just like the Honey Badger, I'd say there is not a lot of things that make this weapon stand out more than other already existing ARs, but it adds more weapons for PvP mod, thus impacting the high level tactics and inventory management tactics that you must have if you want to be very competitive in 0 Hour. Once again, I am looking at the value of this new weapon from a high level design perspective and not so much from a weapon perspective. There is also the new P10C pistol that recently got added, but the team is still working on it, so I thought it would be too early to make a properly informed opinion about it. All I will say is that it looks good and the quality of the content matches with what we have seen so far. All in all, the theme of this update for weapons is pretty clear: mid to long range, which makes perfect sense given the new map coming that has pretty interesting large open spaces and corridors. We also had that in a few other maps before, obviously, such as Hotel Trouble with long corridors near the rooms on the top floor, but we now have new weapons to tackle those challenges in new and different ways. Unfortunately, I cannot show you footage yet, but as soon as we are allowed to, and once we get more final versions of the update, we'll dive into the stats and make better introductions to those different weapons. And that's it for this video, sharing my opinions about the new weapons that would get added to the game with Operation Red Wedding. The update normally goes live on March the 7th, so keep an eye on the official channels for more information about its release. Once again, thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like and to subscribe to support the channel. Like I said at the beginning, it's very difficult for me at the moment to guarantee a regular schedule due to my work, but I will try harder to keep the channel alive with interesting content and high production value. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time, hopefully not in 6 months again.